Let's go live with Caroline Levitt. Let's go live with Caroline Levitt. Miss Caroline Levitt. Here we go, here we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Under the leadership of President Donald J. Trump, the rogue Iranian terrorist regime is being absolutely crushed. 47 years of tolerating and enabling the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism are over. Iran's murderous terrorist leaders are paying for their crimes against America, and they are paying in blood. Since 1979, the terrorist Iranian regime has actively and intentionally facilitated the killings of Americans. They chant death to America and fund other radical terrorists who attack our country and are seeking to destroy Western civilization itself. These terrorists seized our embassy and took 66 Americans hostage in Tehran. They slaughtered 241 U.S. service members with a truck bombing in Beirut. They killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. And this is just a small fraction of their blood-soaked record. Prior leaders have been too weak and ineffective to address this threat. Some, like Barack Hussein Obama, even sent pallets of cash that ultimately financed this terrorist crusade against the United States and our people, while signing stupid and naive deals that put Iran on the path of developing nuclear bombs. After years of endless appeasement and empty statements from politicians on both sides of the political aisle in this town, President Trump is finally the man of action. President Trump is holding these monsters accountable and permanently extinguishing their nuclear ambitions. Future generations of Americans will look to this moment as the moment where the specter of a nuclear armed Iran ended. At the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, launched last weekend, President Trump laid out clear objectives to the American people on what the U.S. military seeks to accomplish through these major combat operations. Number one, destroy the regime's deadly ballistic missiles and completely raze their missile industry to the ground. Number two, annihilate the Iranian regime's navy. And so far, we have destroyed more than 20 Iranian ships, including their top submarine last night, using a torpedo for the first time since World War II. There is not a single Iranian ship underway in the Arabian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, or the Gulf of Oman. Number three, Operation Epic Fury will ensure the regime's terrorist proxies in the region can no longer destabilize the region or the free world and attack our armed forces. And thus far, Iran's proxies are hardly putting up a fight. Number four, this mission will guarantee that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. It's safe to say that thus far, Operation Epic Fury has been a resounding success. American forces have struck more than 2,000 targets, destroying hundreds and hundreds of ballistic missiles, launchers, and drones. As the Department of War said this morning, we expect to have complete and total dominance over Iranian airspace in the coming hours, clearing the skies for our brave warriors to continue achieving these noble and long sought after objectives. There's been a lot of misreporting and intellectual dishonesty from the American media on why President Trump decided to launch this operation. So let me remind you, Operation Midnight Hammer, which took place last June, obliterated Iran's 3 major nuclear sites. Yet the terrorist Iranian regime has remained fully committed to rebuilding its nuclear program. How do we know this? Because Iran has pursued this path of war and violence despite President Trump dispatching 2 of his top and most trusted negotiators to engage in exhaustive and good faith negotiations to try and reach a deal. And the world knows this president's preference is always peace and diplomacy first. Look no further than the 8 additional global conflicts he has ended in the past year as proof. Unfortunately, the terrorist Iranian regime refused to negotiate in good faith. They chose this path of violence and destruction, and they are reaping the consequences of their horrible decision. The regime did what they always have done. They lied, they delayed, they tried to string the United States in this country to rapidly and aggressively produce American-made weapons because they are the best in the world. And the president always likes to get things done as quickly as possible. And so he's been quite vocal in his efforts to try to speed up our defense industry to protect our homeland.
Caroline, can you use some,
Go ahead.
Caroline, could you tell us about the president's current thinking about ground troops and whether they could be used if they were to be sent into Iran? What would they be used for? What's the situation of that?
Well, they're not part of the plan for this operation at this time, but I certainly will never take away military options on behalf of the President of the United States or the Commander-in-Chief, and he wisely does not do the same for himself. I know there's many leaders in the past who like to take options off of the table without having a full understanding of how things could develop. So again, it's not part of the current plan, but I'm not going to remove an option for the President that is on the table. Sean.
Did the United States airstrike a girls' elementary school and kill 175 people?
Not that we know of, Sean, and the Department of War is investigating this matter. And I would just tell you very strongly, the United States of America does not target civilians, unlike the rogue Iranian regime that targets civilians, that kills children, that has killed thousands of their own people in the past several weeks, and uses propaganda quite effectively. And unfortunately, many people in this room have fallen for that propaganda. So I would caution you from pointing the finger at the United States of America when it comes to targeting civilians, because that's not something that these armed forces do. Reagan.
Thanks, Caroline. Prior to the Iran conflict, the SAVE Act was really the focus of the news cycle. Is the SAVE Act still a priority for the administration?
Absolutely.
Could you just provide an update on the administration's talks with Congress to get the SAVE Act through?
SAVE Act is absolutely still a priority for this president and the administration. The focus, of course, of much of the president's time right now is on ensuring the success of Operation Epic Fury, but the president can walk and chew gum at the same time, and he's very much continuing to focus on the issues that matter here at home for the American people, including the passage of the SAVE Act, including on bringing down the cost of living, which is why you'll see the president in about an hour and a half at the Ratepayer Protection Pledge Roundtable, where he will be sitting with big tech companies, with AI companies who are building in communities across the country and have pledged to pick up the cost of the electricity tab in these small towns and communities across the country, which is a great thing for American consumers. So you'll be hearing from the president directly on this very important domestic agenda item later this afternoon. And it's something that he mentioned in his State of Union address. So check it off the list as another promise made and kept by this president. Sure, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. I just wanted to get back to Danny's question. So those four objectives that you read out do not explicitly include regime change. If those objectives were achieved and the Islamic Republic still existed, would that be an acceptable outcome?
That's a hypothetical question that I'm not going to engage in. Again, right now, the president and the commander-in-chief are focused on executing the success of Operation Epic Fury, which we are already doing so in a very tremendous and impressionable way. Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. Two questions. The Trump administration reportedly is considering arming Kurdish forces in the hopes of inspiring a popular uprising in Iran. Could you comment on that report?
I could comment on the fact that the president has held many calls with partners, allies, and leaders in the region, in the Middle East. He did speak to Kurdish leaders with respect to our base that we have in northern Iraq. But as for any report suggesting that the president has agreed to any such plan is completely false and should not be written.
President Trump was saying yesterday that he is okay with someone from within taking over in Iran. He spoke about how Venezuela he saw as a successful model where Delcy Rodriguez took over and had a better relationship. Iran's President Pezeshkian, he took office in 2024 as a relative reformer. He's part of a three-man council now replacing the supreme leader. Does President Trump see him as a potential successor who is more pliable?
Again, that's another hypothetical, and I haven't spoken to the president about this specific individual, so I don't want to get ahead of him on any assessments that should be made.
Thank you. Yesterday, the president acknowledged that oil prices will be a bit high. As for gas prices here in the U.S., what is the admin doing right now to counter that? I mean, should they skyrocket? Is there a plan to help Americans right now with those higher gas prices? And then a second question. On the rash that was on the president's neck, the White House physician said it was a preventative skin cream that he was using. But why is the president using this cream? What are they trying to prevent with this cream?
To your second question, I don't have anything additional to add to the physician statement that we provided to all of you on those questions, but I know the statement said that the redness on the neck will dissipate within the next couple of weeks. To your first question about oil prices, thank God we have a president who has exuded American energy dominance over the past year, an administration that is wholeheartedly focused on keeping prices stable as best as we can. Of course, this operation is temporary to protect the homeland, but crude oil prices did fall yesterday. They remain stable today after the president announced steps to ensure the stability in global energy markets. Again, those include the DEC offering reasonably priced political risk insurance and the potential for the U.S. Navy to provide protection for the flow of energy through the Strait of Hormuz. It is the president's belief and his economic team's belief that the economy continues to be very strong. It's robust and will be able to weather any of the temporary impacts of Operation Epic Fury. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. Just to follow up to that, the timeline for making the Strait of Hormuz safe for oil tankers to transport their oil through the strait, what is that timeline, and what can the president do to speed up that timeline?
I don't want to commit to a timeline, but certainly it's something that is being calculated actively by both the Department of War and the Department of Energy. They're working very closely. Both secretaries are in all of the briefings on this subject with the president, and this is, again, something they're monitoring. And if and when necessary, the United States Navy will provide assistance to escort oil tankers through the strait. Sure, in the blue.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're not in blue, Andrew. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I guess you are, sort of. I'll go to you after.
You had mentioned about the commercial aircraft being used for the evacuations. What about the use of military aircraft? Would that happen in conjunction with
Correct.
that or subsequent to?
That is something that is definitely underway. And of course, we're going to use that in conjunction. We want as many planes, whether they're chartered, commercial, or military, taking Americans out of the Middle East and returning them safely home. So yes. Andrew, go ahead. You're welcome.
At the top of the briefing, you listed a long list of grievances against the Iranian government, going back to the takeover of the embassy in '79, barracks bombing in the '80s, etc. But no one from the administration has laid out the imminent threat that was supposed to be taken care of by this. And the rationales offered by, say, Secretary Rubio, the president's national security advisor, said that the threat was retaliation against American interests from Iran after Israeli strikes. The president says it was his own feeling that Iran was going to attack. Why is it that across the administration you can't say what the imminent threat against the United States was that required us to launch this? And also, Prime Minister Starmer told Parliament today that his reason that he didn't allow the use of British bases was that he was not satisfied that there was a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. Was there an attempt to provide the UK government with a legal basis for these strikes and a viable, thought-through plan?
To the first question, I completely reject the premise of your question. You have had the President of the United States, the Secretary of War, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Vice President of the United States, the Secretary of State. And now I am out here today to explain to you exactly what led the President to make the decision to launch Operation Epic Fury. And President Trump does not make these decisions in a vacuum. This decision to launch this operation was based on a cumulative effect of various direct threats that Iran posed to the United States of America, and the president's feeling based on fact that Iran does pose an imminent and direct threat to the United States of America, based on the fact that they are the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, based on the fact that they were rapidly and aggressively building up their ballistic missile program to give themselves immunity within their country alongside their navy so that inside their country they could continue to create nuclear weapons and nuclear bombs, which would of course pose a risk to Americans in the region and even Americans one day here at home. And then another point on this is the president found that through these extensive, exhaustive, failed negotiations with Iran, that they were hell-bent on death and destruction. So again, the president was not going to be just another president on a very long list who sat back and stood by and passed the buck of this direct threat to the next administration. The president had a feeling, again, based on fact, that Iran was going to strike the United States, was going to strike our assets in the region, and he made a determination to launch Operation Epic Fury based on all of those reasons. And I would like the media to actually report on all of them, rather than just picking sound bites from one person in this administration and saying, oh, they're contradicting the other person. No, again, these decisions are not made in a vacuum. They are made by the president's feeling that Iran was going to strike the United States and our assets in the region, and he was not going to sit back and watch that happen. The determination was made that the president was going to strike first alongside Israel, and that has obviously been proven to be the right decision and an effective one at that. Libby, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. A two-part question for you guys. First, has the president spoken with the family members of those U.S. service members that were killed? Second, given what you've outlined throughout this entire briefing, I mean, the United States has sunk a bunch of Navy ships. We've hit all of these targets. What can Americans expect the goal to be moving forward now that the U.S. has accomplished all of this? What is victory, given we've even taken out Iran's supreme leader? That was an explicit goal.
Again, victory will be determined by the commander-in-chief once the goals and the objectives that we have repeatedly laid out are fully realized. Again, we just in the next few hours will be achieving that dominance over the skies, which means the United States military will be raining missiles and weapons down on Iran to hit these specific targets that have been identified as crucial to take out by the Department of War. Sure, John.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Has the U.S. posture changed in regard to a nuclear North Korea, given the latest strikes on Iran and the fact that the stated goal is to make sure that Iran is not a nuclear country?
I don't have any change in position with respect to North Korea today.
Thank you. A quick follow-up. There's been reports that Ali Khamenei's son has been elected as the next supreme leader. Does the administration think that he is a part of the same regime as his father? Would they like people in the country to rise up and get him out of
There's
power?
reports he's been elected or that he's assuming to be elected. One of the likely options.
Pardon me, what was that?
That he's one of the likely options or that he has been elected. Okay, so we'll wait to confirm until someone actually is elected. Caitlin.
You just mentioned that the president is going to attend the dignified transfer for these families. Given what Secretary Hegseth said this morning, is it the position of this administration that the press should not prominently cover the deaths of U.S. service members?
No, it's the position of this administration that the press in this room and the press across the country should accurately report on the success of Operation Epic Fury and the damage it is doing to the rogue Iranian regime that has threatened the lives of every single American in this room. If the Iranian regime had their choice, they would kill every single person in this room. And so we can all be very grateful that we have an administration and that we have men and women in our armed forces who are willing to sacrifice their own lives for the rest of us in this room and for every American across the country and for every troop that is based in the Middle East. That's what these...
Secretary Hegseth was complaining that it was front page news about these 6 service members who were killed.
That's not what the secretary said, Caitlin, and that's not what the secretary meant, and you know it. You know you are being disingenuous. There is not... We've never had a Secretary of Defense. Who cares more?
Drones get through or tragic things happen. It's front page news. I get it. The press only wants to make the president look bad.
Yeah,
As you know, we cover the deaths of U.S. service
the-
members under every president.
The press does only want to make the president look bad. That's a fact.
Like,
Especially you. No, listen to me. Especially you and especially CNN. And the Secretary of Defense cares deeply about our war fighters and our men and women in uniform. He travels all across this country to meet with them, to connect with them, and your network has hardly ever probably reported on that. You also had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Chairman Kane, who's a brave patriot, standing alongside the secretary at the Pentagon this morning, again expressing his condolences to these families. And I just told you that the President of the United States will be attending their dignified transfer. So please,
That's not making the president look bad. That's showcasing that.
and we expect you to cover that as you should. We expect you to cover that as you should, Caitlin. But you and your network know that you take every single thing this administration says and tries to use it to make the president look bad. That is an objectable fact.
I don't think covering troop deaths is trying to make.
If you're trying to argue right now that CNN's overwhelming coverage is not negative of President Donald Trump, I think the American people would tend to agree, and your ratings would tend to disagree with that as well. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. On the school
Sure.
strike, back to that for a minute. I understand that the U.S. does not target civilian infrastructure. That's what you said. Can you say that there's any evidence right now that it was not a U.S. strike? And then also, you didn't mention Israel in that. Is there any assessment about Israel's potential likely role in that, if at all?
Again, the Department of War is currently investigating this matter, but again, I will reaffirm that the Department of War and the United States Armed Forces do not target civilians, as does the Iranian regime, who kill and execute their own people. Christian.
Two separate issues, Caroline. First, what can you tell us about the military operation in Ecuador? And then secondly, is the president considering invoking the Defense Production Act to boost munition stockpiles while we are in this conflict?
It's not something I've heard the president consider, but as you know, the president has been in a pretty direct correspondence and public correspondence with defense contractors, asking them to aggressively speed up their manufacturing of American-made weapons, which again are the best in the world. With respect to Ecuador, I would point you back to the statement released by the U.S. Southern Command. On March 3rd, Ecuadorian and U.S. military forces launched operations against designated terrorist organizations. These operations are a powerful example of the commitment of partners in Latin America and the Caribbean to combat the scourge of narco-terrorism. And together, we are taking decisive action to confront narco-terrorists who have long inflicted terror, violence, and corruption on citizens throughout the hemisphere. And on that, I would also add that this weekend, I'm pleased to announce the president will welcome the heads of state from 12 nations across our Western Hemisphere in Miami, Florida on Saturday. The point of this newfound Latin America summit is to promote freedom, security, and prosperity in our region. The following countries will be in attendance: Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Honduras, Panama, Paraguay, Trinidad and Tobago, and maybe some others as well. And the president will be speaking with the leaders of this country who have really formed a historic coalition to work together to address criminal narco-terrorist gangs and cartels and counter illegal and mass migration into not only the United States, but the Western Hemisphere, which remains a key and top priority of this president. Thank you very much, everyone. And you'll see the president yourselves in an hour.
Thank you, Caroline.
We'll be back. We definitely will be back. There will be plenty of news today. Definitely more news today. We will be back. Hang around and we will be back. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe. Too much news.